Chapter 1 of Key Out of Time by Andre Norton. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mark Nelson. Key Out of Time. Chapter 1 Lotus World. There was a shading of rose in the pearl arch of sky, deepening at the horizon meeting of sea and air in a rainbow tint of cloud. The lazy swells of the ocean held the same soft color, darkened with crimson veins where spirals of weed drifted. A rose world bathed in soft sunlight, knowing only gentle winds, peace, and sloth. Ross Murdoch leaned forward over the edge of the rock ledge to peer down at a beach of fine sand, pale pink sand with here and there a glitter of a crystalline shell. Or were those delicate fluted oval shells? Even the waves came in languidly, and the breeze which ruffled his hair, smoothed about his sun-browned, half-bare body, caressed it, did not buffet on its way inland to stir the growths which the Terran settlers called trees, but which possessed long lacy fronds instead of true branches. Hawaika, named for the old Polynesian paradise, a world seemingly without flaw, except the subtle one of being too perfect, too welcoming, too wooing. Its long, uneventful, unchanging days enticed forgetfulness, offered a life without effort, except for the mystery. Because this world was not the one pictured on the tape which had brought the Terran settlement team here. A map, a directing guide, a description all in one, that was the ancient voyage tape. Ross himself had helped to loot a storehouse on an unknown planet for a cargo of such tapes. Once they had been the space navigation guides for a race or races who had ruled the star lanes 10,000 years in his own world's past, a civilization which had long since sunk again into the dust of its beginning. Those tapes returned to Terra after their chance discovery, were studied, probed, deciphered by the best brains of his time, shared out by lot between already suspicious Terran powers, bringing into the exploration of space bitter rivalries and old hatreds. Such a tape had landed their ship on Hawaika, a world of shallow seas and archipelagos instead of true continents. The settlement team had had all the knowledge contained on that tape crowded into them, only to discover that much they had learned from it was false. Of course, none of them had expected to discover here still the cities, the civilization the tape had projected as existing in that long-ago period. But no present island string they had visited approximated those on the maps they had seen, and so far they had not found any trace that any intelligent beings had walked, built, lived on these beautiful, slumberous atolls. So, what had happened to the Hawaika of the tape? Ross's right hand rubbed across the ridged scars which disfigured his left one, to be carried for the rest of his life as a mark of his meeting with the Star Voyagers in the past of his own world. He had deliberately seared his own flesh to break the mental control they had asserted. Then the battle had gone to him. But from it, he had brought another scar, the unease of that old terror when Ross Murdoch, fighter, rebel, outlaw by the conventions of his own era, Ross Murdoch, who considered himself an exceedingly tough individual, that toughness steeled by the training for time agent sorties, had come up against a power he did not understand, instinctively hated and feared. Now he breathed deeply of the wind, the smell of the sea, the sense of the land growths, strange but pleasant. So easy to relax, to drop into the soft, lulling swing of this world in which they had found no fault, no danger, no irritant. Yet, once those others had been here, the blue-suited, hairless ones he called Baldies. And what had happened then or afterward? A black head, brown shoulders, slender body broke the sleepy slip of the waves. A shimmering mask covered the face, capturing glitter fire in the sun. 2 hands freed a chin curved yet firmly set, a mouth made more for laughter than sternness, wide, dark eyes. Karara Traherne of the Ali, the one-time Hawaiian god chieftain line, was an exceedingly pretty girl. But Ross regarded her aloofly, with a coldness which bordered on hostility, as she flipped her mask into its pocket on top of the gill pack. Below his rocky perch, she came to a halt, her feet slightly apart in the sand, an impish twist to her lips as she called mockingly, "Why not come in? The water's fine." "Perfect, like all the rest of this." Some of his impatience came out in the sour tone. "No luck as usual?" "As usual," Karara conceded. "If there ever was a civilization here, it's been gone so long we'll probably never find any traces. Why don't you just pick out a good place to set up that time probe and try it blind?" Ross scowled. "Because," his patience was exaggerated to the point of insult, "we have only one peep probe. Once it's set, we can't tear it down easily for transport somewhere else, so we want to be sure there's something to look at beyond." She began to wring the water out of her long hair. "Well, as far as we've explored, nothing. Come yourself next time. Tino Rao and Tawa aren't particular, they like company." Putting 2 fingers to her mouth, Karara whistled. Twin heads popped out of the water, facing the shore and her. Projecting noses, mouths with upturned corners so they curved in a lasting pleasant grin at the mammals on the shore, the dolphin pair, mammals whose ancestors had chosen the sea, whistled back in such close counterfeit of the girl's signal that they could be an echo of her call. Years earlier, their species' intelligence had surprised, almost shocked men. Experiments, training, cooperation had developed a tie which gave the water-limited race of mankind new eyes, ears, minds to see, evaluate, and report concerning an element in which the bipeds were not free. Hand in hand with that cooperation had gone other experiments. Just as the clumsy armored diving suits of the early 20th century had allowed man to begin penetration into a weird new world, so had the Frogman equipment made him still freer in the sea. And now the gill pack, which separated the needed oxygen from the water, made even that lighter burden of tanks obsolete. But there remained depths to which man could not descend, whose secrets were closed to him. There the dolphins operated, in a partnership of minds, equal minds, though that last fact had been difficult for man to accept. Ross's irritation, unjustified as he knew it to be, did not rest on Tino Rao or Tawa. He enjoyed the hours when he buckled on Gilpack and took to the sea with those 2 10-foot black and silver escorts, sharing the action. But Karara's presence was a different matter altogether. The agents' teams had always been strictly masculine. 2 men partnered for an interlocking of abilities and temperaments, going through training together, becoming 2 halves of a strong and efficient whole. Before being summarily recruited into the project, Ross had been a loner, living on the ragged edges of the law, an indigestible bit for the civilization which had become too ordered and adjusted to absorb his kind. But in the project, he had discovered others like himself, men born out of time, too ruthless, too individualistic for their own age, but able to operate with ease in the dangerous paths of the time agents. And when the time search for the wrecked alien ships had succeeded, and the first intact ship found, used, duplicated, the agents had come from forays into the past to be trained anew for travel to the stars. First there had been Ross Murdoch, criminal. Then there had been Ross Murdoch and Gordon Ash, time agents. Now there was still Ross and Gordon, and a quest as perilous as any they had known. Yet this time they had to depend upon Karara and the dolphins. Tomorrow, Ross was still not sorting out his thoughts, truly aware of the feeling which worked upon him as a thorn in the finger. I will come. Good. If she recognized his hostility for what it was, that did not bother her. Once more she whistled to the dolphins, waved a casual farewell with one hand, and headed up the beach toward the base camp. Ross chose a more rugged path over the cliff. Suppose they did not find what they sought near here. Yet the old taped map suggested that this was approximately the site starred upon it, marking a city, a starport. Ash had volunteered for Hawaika, demanded this job after the disastrous Topaz affair, when the team of Apache volunteers had been sent out too soon to counter what might have been a Red sneak settlement. Ross was still unhappy over the ensuing months when only Major Calgary's and maybe, in a lesser part, Ross had kept Gordon Ash in the project at all. That Topaz had been a failure was accepted when the settlement ship did not return, and that had added to Ash's sense of guilt for having recruited and partially trained the lost team. Among those dispatched over Ash's vehement protests had been Travis Fox, which shared with Ash and Ross the first galactic flight in an age-old derelict spaceship. Travis Fox, the Apache archaeologist, had he ever reached Topaz? Or would he and his team wander forever between worlds? Did they set down on a planet where some inimical form of native life or a red settlement had awaited them? The very uncertainty of their fate continued to ride Ash. So he insisted on coming out with the second settlement team, the volunteers of Samoan and Hawaiian descent, to carry on a yet more exciting and hazardous exploration. Just as the project had probed into the past of Terra, so would Ash and Ross now attempt to discover what lay in the past of Hawaika, to see this world as it had been at the height of the galactic civilization, and so to learn what they could about their forerunners into space. And the mystery they had dropped into upon landing added to the necessity for that discovery or discoveries. Their probe, if fortune favored them, might become a gate through time. The installation was a vast improvement over these passage points they had first devised. Technical information had taken a vast leap forward after Terran engineers and scientists had had access to the tapes of the Stellar Empire. Adaptations and shortcuts developed, so that a new hybrid technology came into use, woven from the knowledge and experimentation of two civilizations thousands of years apart in time. If and when he or Ash, or Karara and her dolphins, discovered the proper site, the two agents could set up their own equipment. Both Ross and Ash had had enough drill in the process. All they needed was the brick of discovery. Then they could build their wall. But they must find some remainder of the past, the smallest trace of ancient ruin upon which to center their PEEP probe. And since landing here, the long days had flowed into weeks with no such discovery made. Ross crossed the ridge of rock that formed a coxcomb rise on the island's spine and descended to the village. As they had been trained, the Polynesian settlers adapted native products to their own heritage of building and tools. It was necessary that they live off the land, for their transport ship had had storage space only for a limited number of supplies and tools. After it took off to return home, they would be wholly on their own for several years. Their ship, a silvery ball, rested on a rock ledge, its pilot and crew having lingered to learn the results of Ash's search. 4 days more, and they would have to lift off for home, even if the agents still had only negative results to report. That disappointment was driving Ash, the way that 6 months earlier his outrage and guilt feelings over the Topaz affair had driven him. Karara's suggestion carried weight the longer Ross thought about it. With more swimmers hunting, there was just that much increased chance of turning up some clue. So far, the dolphins had not reported any dangerous native sea life, or any perils except the natural ones any diver always had at his shoulder under the waves. There were extra gill packs, and all of the settlers were good swimmers. An organized hunt ought to shake the Polynesians out of their present do-it-tomorrow attitude. As long as they had had definite work before them, the unloading of the ship, the building of the village, all the labors incidental to the establishing of this space, they had shown energy and enthusiasm. It was only during the last couple of weeks that the languor which appeared part of the atmosphere here had crept up on them, so that now they were content to live at a slower and lazier pace. Ross remembered Ash's comparison made the evening before, likening Hawaika to a legendary Terran island where the inhabitants lived a drugged existence, feeding upon the seeds of a native plant. Hawaika was fast becoming a lotus land for Terrans. Through here, then westward. Ash hunched over the crate table in the mat-walled house. He did not look up as Ross entered. Carrara's still damp head was bowed until those black locks, now sleek to a round skull, almost touched the man's close-cropped brown hair. They were both studying a map as if they saw not lines on paper, but the actual inlets and lagoons which that drawing represented. "You are sure, Gordon, that this is the modern point to match the site on the tape?" The girl brushed back straying hair. Ash shrugged. There were tight brackets about his mouth which had not been there 6 months ago. He moved jerkily, not with the fluid grace of those old days when he had faced the vast distance of time travel with unruffled calm and a self-confidence to steady and support the novice Ross. The general outline of these two islands could stand for the capes on this. He pulled a second map, this on transparent plastic to fit over the first. The capes marked on the much larger body of land did slip over the modern islands with a surprising fit. The once large island, shattered and broken, could have produced the groups of atolls and islets they now prospected. How long? Carrara mused aloud. And why? Ash shrugged. 10,000 years? 5? 2? He shook his head. We have no idea. It's apparent that there must have been some worldwide cataclysm here to change the contours of the land masses so much. We may have to wait on a return spaceflight to bring a copter or a hydroplane to explore farther. His hand swept beyond the boundaries of the map to indicate the whole of Hawaika. A year, maybe 2 before we could hope for that, Ross cut in. Then we'll have to depend on whether the Council believes this important enough. The contrariness which spiked his tongue whenever Carrara was present made him say that without thinking. Then the twitch of Ash's lip brought home Ross's error. Gordon needed reassurance now, not a recitation of the various ways their mission could be doomed. Look here. Ross came to the table, his hand sweeping past Carrara as he used his forefinger for a pointer. We know that what we want could be easily overlooked, even with the dolphins helping us to check. This whole area is too big, and you know that it is certain that whatever might be down there would be hidden with sea growths. Suppose 10 of us start out in a semicircle from about here and go as far as this point, heading inland. Video cameras here and here. Comb the whole sector inch by inch if we have to. After all, we have plenty of time and manpower. Carrara laughed softly. Manpower. Always manpower, Ross. But there is woman power too, and we have perhaps even sharper sight. But this is a good idea, Gordon. Let me see. She began to tell off names on her fingers. Pakiki, Vioha, Hori, Liliha, Tema, Ui, Honoura. They are the best in the water. Me, you, Gordon, Ross. That makes 10 with keen eyes to look. And always there are Tino Rao and Tawa. We will take supplies and camp here on this island, which looks so much like a finger crooked to beckon. Yes, somehow that beckoning finger seems to me to promise better fortune. Shall we plan it so? Some of the tight look was gone from Ash's face, and Ross relaxed. This was what Gordon needed. Not to be sitting in here going over maps, reports, reworking over and over their scant leads. Ash had always been a field man, and the settlement work had been stultifying, a laborious chore for him. When Carrara had gone, Ross dropped down on the bunk against the side wall. What did happen here, do you think? Half was real interest in the mystery they had mulled over and over since they had landed on a Hawaika which diverged so greatly from the maps. The other half, a desire to keep Ash thinking on a subject removed from immediate worries. An atomic war? Could be. There are old radiation traces. But these aliens had, I'm sure, progressed beyond atomics. Suppose, just suppose, they could tamper with the weather, with the balance of the planet's crust. We don't know the extent of their powers, how they would use them. They had a colony here once, or there would have been no guide tape. And that is all we are sure. Chapter 2 of Key Out of Time by Andre Norton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Key Out of Time. Chapter 2. Lair of Mano Nui. Just under the surface of the water, the sea was warm. Weird life showed colors Ross could name, shades he could not. The corals, the animals masquerading as plants, the plants disguised as animals, which inhabited the oceans of Terra, had their counterparts here. And the settlers had given them the familiar names, though the crabs, the fish, the anemones, and the weeds of the shallow lagoons and reefs were not identical with Terran creatures. The trouble was that there was too much, such a wealth of life to attract the eyes, hold attention, that it was difficult to keep to the job at hand, the search for what was not natural, for what had no normal place here. As the land seduced the senses and bewitched the off-worlder, so did the sea have its enchantment to pull one from duty. Ross resolutely skimmed by a forest of weaving, waving lace, which varied from a green, which was almost black, to a pale tint he could not truly identify. Among those waving fans lurked ghost fish, finned swimmers transparent enough so that one could sight, through their pallid eyes, the evidences of recently ingested meals. The Terrans had begun their sweep search a half-hour ago, slipping overboard from a ferry canoe, heading in toward the checkpoint of the Finger Isle, forming an arc of expert divers, men and girls so at home in the ocean that they should be able to make the discovery Ash needed, if such did exist. Mystery built upon mystery on Hawaika, Ross thought as he used his spear gun to push aside a floating banner of weed in order to peer below its curtain. The native life of this world must always have been largely aquatic. The settlers had discovered only a few small animals on the islands, the largest of which was the burrower, a creature not unlike a miniature monkey, in that it had hind legs on which it walked erect and forepaws, well clawed for digging purposes, which it used with as much skill and dexterity as a man used hands. Its body was hairless, and it was able to assume, chameleon-like, the color of the soil and rocks where it denned. The head was set directly on its bowed shoulders, without vestige of neck, and it had round bubbles of eyes near the top of its skull, a nose which was a single vertical slit, and a wide mouth fanged for crushing the shelled creatures on which it fed. All in all, to Terran eyes, it was a vaguely repulsive creature, but as far as the settlers had been able to discover, it was the highest form of land life. The smaller rodent-like things, the two species of wingless diving birds, and an odd assortment of reptiles and amphibians sharing the island were all the burrower's prey. A world of sea and islands. What type of native intelligent life had it once supported? Or had this been only a galactic colony, with no native population before the coming of the stellar explorers? Ross hovered above a dark pocket where the bottom had suddenly dipped into a saucer-shaped depression. The sea growth about the rim rippled in the water raggedly, but there was something about its general outline. Ross began a circumference of that hollow. allowing for the distortion of the growths which had formed lumpy excrescences or reached turrets toward the surface. Yes, allowing for those, this was decidedly something out of the ordinary. The depression was too regular, too even. Ross was certain of that. With a thrill of excitement, he began a descent into the cup, striving to trace signs which would prove his suspicion correct. How many years, centuries, had the slow coverage of the sea life gathered there, flourished, died with other creatures to build anew on the remains? Now there was only a hint that the depression had other than a natural beginning. Anchoring with a one-handed grip on a spike of Hawaiian coral, smoother than the Terran species, Ross aimed the butt of his spear gun at the nearest wall of the saucer, striving to reach into a crevice between two lumps of growth, and so probe into what might lie behind. The spear rebounded. There was no breaking that crust with such a fragile tool. But perhaps he would have better luck lower down. The depression was deeper than he had first judged. Now the light which existed in the shallows vanished. Red and yellow as colors went. But Ross was aware of blues and greens and shades and tints which were not visible above. He switched on his diving torch, and color returned within its beam. A swirl of weed, pink in the light, became darkly emerald beyond, as if it possessed the chameleon ability of the burrowers. He was distracted by that phenomenon, and so he transgressed the diver's rule of never becoming so absorbed in surroundings as to forget caution. Just when did Ross become aware of that shadow below? Was it when a school of ghost fish burst unexpectedly between weed growths, and he turned to follow them with the torch? Then the outer edge of his beam caught the movement of a shape, a flutter in the water of the gloomy depths. Ross swung around, his back to the wall of the saucer as he aimed the torch down at what was arising there. The light caught and held for a long moment of horror, something which might have come out of the nightmares of his own world. Afterward, Ross knew that the monster was not as large as it seemed in that endless minute of fear, perhaps no bigger than the dolphins. He had had training in shark-infested seas on Terra, been carefully briefed against the danger from such hunters of the deep and ocean jungles. But this kind of thing had only existed before in the fairy tales of his race, as the dragon of old lore. A scaled head with wide eyes gleaming in the light beam with cold and sullen hate. A gaping mouth fang-filled. A horn-set muzzle. That long, undulating neck, and below it, the half-seen bulk of a monstrous body. His spear gun, the knife at his waist belt, neither were protection against this. Yet to turn his back on that rising head was more than Ross could do. He pulled himself back against the wall of the saucer. The thing before him did not rush to attack. Plainly, it had seen him, and now it moved with the leisure of a hunter, having no fears concerning the eventual outcome of the hunt. But the light appeared to puzzle it, and Ross kept the beam shining straight into those evil eyes. The shock of the encounter was wearing off. Now Ross edged his flipper into a crevice to hold him steady while his hand went to the sonic comm at his waist. He tapped out a distress call which the dolphins could relay to the swimmers. The swaying dragon had paused, held rigid on a stiff, scaled column in the center of the saucer. That sonic vibration either surprised or bothered the hunter, made it wary. Ross tapped again. The belief that if he tried to escape, he was lost, that only while he faced it so had he any chance, grew stronger. The head was only inches below the level of his flippered feet as he held to the weeds. Again that weaving movement, the rise of head, a tremor along the serpent neck, an agitation in the depths. The dragon was on the move again. Ross aimed the light directly at the head. The scales, as far as he could determine, were not horny plates, but lapped silvery ovals such as fish possessed. And the underparts of the monster might even be vulnerable to his spear. But knowing the way a Terran shark could absorb the darts of that weapon and survive, Ross feared to attack except as a last resort. Above and to his left, there was a small hollow where in the past some portion of the growths had been ripped away. If he could fit himself into that crevice, perhaps he could keep the dragon at bay until help arrived. Ross moved with all the skill he had. His hand closed upon the edge of the niche, and he whirled himself up, just making it into that refuge as the head lashed at him wickedly. His suspicion that the dragon would attack anything on the run was well founded, and he knew he had no hope of winning to the surface above. Now he stood in the crevice, facing outward, watching the head darting in the water. He had switched off the torch, and the loss of light appeared to bewilder the reptile for some precious seconds. Ross pulled as far back into the niche as he could, until the point of one shoulder touched a surface which was sleek, smooth, and cold. The shock of that contact almost sent him hurtling out again. Gripping the spear before him in his right hand, Ross cautiously felt behind him with the left. His fingertips glided over a seamless surface where the growths had been torn or peeled away. Though he could not, or dared not, turn his head to see, he was certain that this was his proof that the walls of the saucer had been fashioned and placed there by some intelligent creature. The dragon had risen, hovering now in the water directly before the entrance to Ross's hole, its neck curled back against its bulk. It had wide flippers moving like planes to hold it poised. The body, sloping from a massive round of shoulders to a tapering rear, was vaguely familiar. If one provided a Terran seal with a gorgon head and scales in place of fur, the effect would be similar. But Ross was assuredly not facing a seal at this moment. Slight movement of the flippers kept it stabilized as if it sprawled on a supporting surface. With the neck flattened against the body, the head curved downward until the horn on its snout pointed the tip straight at Ross's middle. The Terran steadied his spear gun. The dragon's eyes were its most vulnerable targets. If the creature launched the attack, Ross would aim for them. Both man and dragon were so intent upon their duel that neither was conscious of the sudden swirl overhead. A sleek, dark shape struck down, skimming across the humped-back ridge of the dragon. Some of the settlers had empathy with the dolphins to a high degree, but Ross's own powers of contact were relatively feeble. Only now he was given an assurance of aid and a suggestion to attack. The dragon head writhed, twisting as the reptile attempted to see above and behind its own length. But the dolphin was only a streak fast disappearing. And that writhing changed the balance the monster had maintained, pushing it toward Ross. The Terran fired too soon and without proper aim, so the dart snaked past the head. But the harpoon line half-hooked about the neck and seemed to confuse the creature. Ross squirmed as far back as he could into his refuge and drew his knife. Against those fangs, the weapon was an almost useless toy, but it was all he had. Again the dolphin dived in attack on the reptile, this time seizing in its mouth the floating cord of the harpoon and giving it a jerk which jolted the dragon even more off balance, pulling it away from Ross's niche and out into the center of the saucer. There were two dolphins in action now, Ross saw, playing the dragon as matadors might play a bull, keeping the creature disturbed by their agile maneuvers. Whatever prey came naturally to the Hawaiian monster was not of this type, and the creature was not prepared to deal effectively with their teasing, dodging tactics. Neither had touched the beast, but they kept it constantly striving to get at them. Though it swam in circles attempting to face its teasers, the dragon did not abandon the level before Ross's refuge, and now and then it darted its head at him, unwilling to give up its prey. Only one of the dolphins frisked and dodged above now, as the sonic on Ross's belt vibrated against his lower ribs with its message warning to be prepared for further action. Somewhere above, his own kind gathered. Hurriedly, he tapped out in code his warning in return. Two dolphins busy again, their last dive over the dragon pushing the monster down past Rosh's niche toward the saucer's depths. Then they flashed up and away. The dragon was rising in turn, but coming to meet the Hawaiian creature was a ball giving off light, bringing sharp vision and color with it. Ross's arm swung up to shield his eyes. There was a flash. Such answering vibration carried through the waves that even his nerves, far less sensitive than those of the life about him, reacted. He blinked behind his mask. A fish floated by, spiraling up, its belly exposed. And about him growths drooped, trailed lifelessly through the water, while there was a now motionless bulk sinking to the obscurity of the depression floor. A weapon perfected on Terra to use against sharks and barracuda had worked here to kill what could have been a more formidable prey. The Terran wriggled out of the niche, rose to meet another swimmer. As Ash descended, Ross relayed his news via the sonic. The dolphins were already nosing into the depths in pursuit of their late enemy. "Look here." Ross guided Ash to the crevice which had saved him, aimed the torch beam into it. He had been right. There was a long groove in the covering built up by the growths. A vertical strip some 6 feet long of a uniform gray showed. Ash touched the find and then gave the alert via the sonic code. "Metal or an alloy, we found it." But what did they have? Even after an hour's exploration by the full company, Ash's expert search with his knowledge of artifacts and ancient remains, they were still baffled. It would require labor and tools they did not have to clear the whole of the saucer. They could be sure only of its size and shape, and the fact that its walls were of an unknown substance which the sea could cloak but not erode. For the length of gray surface showed not the slightest pitting or time wear. Down at its centermost point they found the dragon's den, an arch coated with growth, before which sprawled the body of the creature. That was dragged aloft with the dolphin's aid, to be taken ashore for study. But the arch itself, was that part of some old installation? Torches to the fore, they entered its shadow, only to remain baffled. Here and there were patches of the same gray showing in its interior. Ash dug the butt of his spear gun into the sand on the flooring to uncover another oval depression. But what it all signified, or what had been its purpose, they could not guess. "Set up the PEEP probe here?" Ross asked. Ash's head moved in a slow negative. "Look farther, spread out," the sonic clicked. Within a matter of minutes, the dolphins reported new remains, 2 more saucers, each larger than the first, set in a line on the ocean floor, pointing directly to Karara's Finger Island. Cautiously explored, these were discovered to be free of any but harmless life. They stirred up no more dragons. When the Terrans came ashore on Finger Island to rest and eat their midday meal, one of the men paced along the beach dragon. Ashore, it lost none of its frightening aspect. And seeing it, even beached and dead, Ross wondered at his luck in surviving the encounter without a scratch. "I think that this one would be alone," Pakiki commented. "Where there is an eater of this size, there is usually only one." "Mano Nui," the girl Tama shivered as she gave to this monster the name of the shark demon of her people. "Such a one is truly king shark in these waters. But why have we not sighted its like before? Tino Rao, Tawa, they have not reported such." "Probably because, as Pakiki says, these things are rare," Ash returned. "A carnivore of size would have to have a fairly wide hunting range. Yet there's evidence that this thing was laired in that den for some time. Which means that it must have a defined hunting territory allowing no trespassing from others of its species." Karara nodded. "Also, it may hunt only at intervals, eat heavily, and lie quiet until the meal is digested. There are large snakes on Terra that follow that pattern." Ross was in its front yard when it came after him. "From now on," Ash swallowed a quarter of fruit, "we know what to watch for, and the weapon which will finish it off. Don't forget that." The delicate mechanisms of their sonics had already registered the vibrations which would warn of a dragon's presence, and the depth globes would then do the rest. "Big skull, oversized for the body." Pakiki squatted on his heels by the head lying on the sand at the end of the now fully extended neck. Ross had heretofore been more aware of the armament of that head, the fangs set in the powerful jaws, the horn on the snout. But Pakiki's comment drew his attention to the fact that the scale-covered skull did dome up above the eye pits in a way to suggest ample brain room. Had the thing been intelligent? Karara put that into words. Rule 1? She went over to survey the carcass. Ross resented her half-question, whether it was addressed to him or mere thinking aloud on her part. Rule 1. Conserve native life to the fullest extent. Humanoid form may not be the only evidence of intelligence. There were the dolphins to prove that point right on Terra. But did Rule 1 mean that you had to let a monster nibble at you because it might just be a high type of alien intelligence? Let Karara spout Rule 1 while backed into a crevice underwater with that horn stabbing at her midsection. Rule 1 does not mean to forego self-defense, Ash commented mildly. This thing is a hunter, and you can't stop to apply recognition techniques when you are being regarded as legitimate prey. If you are the stronger, or an equal, yes. Stop and think before becoming aggressive. But in a situation like this, take no chances. Anyway, from now on, Karara pointed out, Chapter 3 of Key Out of Time by Andre Norton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Key Out of Time. Chapter 3 The Ancient Mariners. Another map spread out, and this time pinned down with small stones on beach gravel. Here, here, and here. Ash's finger indicated the points marked in a pattern which flared out from 3 sides of Finger Island. Each marked a set of 3 undersea depressions in perfect alliance with the land, which, according to the galactic map, had once been a cape on a much larger landmass. Though the Terrans had found the ruins, if those saucers in the sea could be so termed, the remains had no meaning for the explorers. "Do we set up here?" Ross asked. "If we could just get a report to send back, that might mean the difference between awakening the cooperation of the project policymakers so that a flood of supplies and personnel would begin to head their way." "We set up here," Ash decided. He had selected a point between 2 of the lines where a reef would provide them with a secure base, and once that decision was made, the Terrans went into action. 2 days to go, to install the Pete probe and take some shots before the ship had to clear with or without their evidence. Together, Ross and Ash floated the installation out to the reef, Ui and Karara helping to tow the equipment and parts, the dolphins lending pushing noses on occasion. The aquatic mammals were as interested as the human beings they aided. And in water, their help was invaluable. Had dolphins developed hands, Ross wondered fleetingly, would they have long ago wrested control of their native world, or at least of its seas, from the humankind? All the human beings worked with practiced ease, even while masked and submerged, to set the probe in place, aiming it landward at the checkpoint of the finger's protruding nail of rock. After Ash made the final adjustments, tested each and every part of the assembly, he gestured them in. Karara's swift hand movement asked a question, and Ash's sonic code clicked in reply, "At twilight." Yes, dusk was the proper time for using a Pete probe. To see without risk of being sighted in return was their safeguard. Here, Ash had no historical data to guide him. Their search for the former inhabitants might be a long, drawn-out process, skipping across centuries as the machine was adjusted to Terran time eras. When were they here? Back on shore, Carrara shook out her hair, spread it over her shoulders to dry. How many 100 years back will the probe return? More likely thousands, Ross commented. Where will you start, Gordon? Ash brushed sand from the page of the notebook he had steadied against one bent knee and gazed out at the reef where they had set the probe. 10,000 years. Why? Carrara wanted to know. Why that exact figure? We know that galactic ships crashed on Terra then, so their commerce and empire, if it was an empire, was far-flung at that time. Perhaps they were at the zenith of their civilization. Perhaps they were already on the downslope. I do not think they were near the beginning, so that date is as good a starting place as any. If we don't hit what we're after, then we can move forward until we do. Do you think that there ever was a native population here? Might have been. But without any large land animals, no modern traces of any? She protested. Of people? Ash shrugged. Good answers for both. Suppose there was a worldwide epidemic of proportions to wipe out a species, or a war in which they used forces beyond our comprehension to alter the whole face of this planet, which did happen, the alteration, I mean. Several things could have removed intelligent life. Then such species as the burrowers could have developed, or evolved from smaller, more primitive types. Those ape things we found on the desert planet. Ross thought back to their first voyage on the homing derelict. Maybe they had once been men and were degenerating. And the winged people, they could have been less than men on their way up. Ape things? Winged people? Carrara interrupted. Tell me. There was something imperious in her demand, but Ross found himself describing in detail their past adventures, first on the world of sand and sealed structures where the derelict had rested for a purpose its involuntary passengers had never understood, and then of the Terran's limited exploration of that other planet, which might have been the capital world of a far-flung stellar empire. There they had made a pact with the winged people living in the huge buildings of a jungle-choked city. But you see, the Polynesian girl turned to Ash when Ross had finished, you did find them, these ape things and the winged people. But here, there are only dragons and the burrowers. Are they the start or the finish? I want to know. Why? Ash asked. Not just because I am curious, though I am that also, but because we too must have a beginning and an end. Do we come up from the seas, rise to know and feel and think, just to return to such beginning at our end? If your winged people were climbing and your ape things descending, she shook her head, it would be frightening to hold a cord of life, both ends in your hands. Is it good for us to see such things, Gordon? Men have asked that question all their thinking lives, Carrara. There have been those who have said no, who have turned aside and tried to halt the growth of knowledge here or there, attempted to make man stand still on one tread of a stairway. Only there is that in us which will not stop, ill-fitted as we may be for the climbing. Perhaps we shall be safe and untroubled here on Hawaika if I do not go out to that reef tonight. By that action, I may bring real danger down on all of us. Yet I cannot hold back for that. Could you? No, I do not believe that I could, she agreed. We're here because we are of those who must know, volunteers, and being of that temperament, it is in us always to take the next step. Even if it leads to a fall, she added in a low tone. Ash gazed at her, though her own eyes were on the sea, where a lace of waves marked the reef. Her words were ordinary enough, but Ross straightened to match Ash's stare. Why had he felt that odd instant of uneasiness, as if his heart had fluttered instead of beating true? I know of you time agents, Carrara continued. There were plenty of stories about you told while we were in training. Tall tales, I can imagine most of them. Ash laughed, but his amusement sounded forced to Ross. Perhaps, though I do not believe that many could be any taller than the truth. And so also I have heard of that strict rule you follow, that you must do nothing which might alter the course of history. But suppose here that the course of history could be altered, that whatever catastrophe occurred might be averted. If that was done, what would happen to our settlement in the here and now? I don't know. That is an experiment which we have never dared to try, which we won't try. Not even if it would mean a chance of life for a whole native race, she persisted. Alternate worlds then, maybe. Ross's imagination caught up that idea. 2 worlds from a change point in history, he elaborated, noted her look of puzzlement. One stemming from one decision, another from the alternate. I've heard of that. But Gordon, if you could return to the time of decision here, and you had it in your power to say, yes, live, or no, die to the alien natives, what would you do? I don't know, but neither do I think I shall ever be placed in that position. Why do you ask? She was twisting her still damp hair into a ponytail and tying it so with a cord. Because I feel... No, I cannot really put it into words, Gordon. It is that feeling one has on the eve of some important event. Anticipation, fear, excitement. You'll let me go with you tonight, please? I want to see it. Not the Hawaika that is, but that other world with another name, the one they saw and knew. An instant protest was hot in Ross's throat, but he had no time to voice it, for Ash was already nodding. All right, but we may have no luck at all. Fishing in time is a chancy thing, so don't be disappointed if we don't turn you up that other world. Now, I'm going to pamper these old bones for an hour or 2. Amuse yourselves, children. He lay back and closed his eyes. The past 2 days had wiped half the shadows from his lean, tanned face. He had dropped 2 years, 3, Ross thought thankfully. Let them be lucky tonight, and Ash's cure could be nearly complete. What do you think happened here? Carrara had moved so that her back was now to the wash of waves, her face more in the shadow. How do I know? Could be any of 10 different things. And will I please shut up and leave you alone? She countered swiftly. Do you wish to savor the excitement then? Explore a world upon world? Or am I saying it right? We have Hawaika 1, which is a new world for us. Now there is Hawaika 2, which is removed in time, not distance. And to explore that... We won't be exploring it, really, Ross protested. Why? Did your agents not spend days, weeks, even months of time in the past on Terra? What is to prevent your doing the same here? Training? We have no way of learning the drill. What do you mean? Well, it wasn't as easy as you seem to think it was back on Terra, he began scornfully. We didn't just stroll through one of those gates and set up business, say in Nero's Rome or Montezuma's Mexico. An agent was physically and psychologically fitted to the era he was to explore. Then he trained, and how he trained. Ross remembered the weary hours spent learning how to use a bronze sword, the technique of beaker trading, the hypnotic instruction in a language which was already dead centuries before his own country existed. You learned the language, the customs, everything you could about your time and your cover. You were letter perfect before you took even a trial run. And here you would have no guides, Carrara said, nodding. Yes, I can see the difficulty. Then you will just use the peep probe? Probably. Or maybe later we can scout through a gate. We have the material to set one up, but it would be a strictly limited project, allowing no chance of being caught. Maybe the big brains back home can take peep data and work out some basis of infiltration for us from it. But that would take years. I suppose so. Only you begin to swim in the shallows, don't you? Not by jumping off a cliff. She laughed. True enough. However, even a look into the past might solve part of the big mystery. Ross grunted and stretched out to follow Ash's example. but behind his closed eyes his brain was busy, and he did not cultivate the patience he needed. Peep probes were all right, but Carrara had a point. You wanted more than a small window into a mystery. You wanted a part in solving it. The setting of the sun deepened rose to red, made a dripping, wine-hued banner of most of the sky, so that under it they moved in a crimson sea, looked back at an island where shadows were embers instead of ashes. 3 humans, 2 dolphins, and a machine mounted on a reef which might not even have existed in the time they sought. Ash made his final adjustments, and then his finger pressed a button and they watched the vista plate no larger than the palms of 2 hands. Nothing. A dull gray nothing. Something must have gone wrong with their assembly work. Ross touched Ash's shoulder, but now there were shadows gathering on the plate, thickening to sharpen into a distinct picture. It was still the sunset hour they watched, but somehow the colors were paler, less red and sullen than the ones about them in the here and now. And they were not seeing the isle toward which the probe had been aimed. They were looking at a rugged coastline where cliffs lifted well above the beach strand. While on those cliffs, Ross had not realized Carrara had reached out to grasp his arm until her nails bit into his flesh. And even then he was hardly aware of the pain, because there was a building on the cliff. Massive walls of native rock reared in outward defenses, culminating in towers. And from the high point of one tower, the pointed tail of a banner cracked in the wind. There was a headland of rock reaching out, not toward them, but to the north, and rounding that... "War canoe!" Carrara exclaimed, but Ross had another identification. Longboat. In reality, the vessel was neither one nor the other, not the double canoe of the Pacific, which had transported warriors on raid from one island to another, or the shield-hung warship of the Vikings. But the Terrans were right in its purpose. That rakish, sharp-prowed ship had been fashioned for swift passage of the seas, for maneuverability as a weapon. Behind the first nosed another and a third. Their sails were dyed by the sun, but there were devices painted on them, and the lines of those designs glittered as if they had been drawn with a metallic fluid. "The castle!" Ash's cry pulled their attention back to land. There was movement along those walls. Then came a flash, a splash in the water close enough to the lead ship to wet her deck with spray. "They're fighting!" Carrara shouldered against Ross for a better look. The ships were altering course, swinging away from land out to sea. "Moving too fast for sails alone, and I don't see any oars." Ross was puzzled. "How do you suppose—" The bombardment from the castle continued, but did not score any hits. Already the ships were out of range, the lead vessel off the screen of the Peep as well. Then there was just the castle in the sunset. Ash straightened up. "Rocks," he repeated wonderingly. "They were throwing rocks." But those ships, they must have had engines. They weren't just depending on sails when they retreated. Ross added his own cause for bewilderment. Carrara looked from one to the other. "There is something here you do not understand. What is wrong?" "Catapults, yes," Ash said with a nod. "Those would fit periods corresponding from the Roman Empire into the Middle Ages. But you're right, Ross. Those ships had power of some kind to take them offshore that quickly." "A technically advanced race coming up against a more backward one?" hazarded the younger man. "Could be. Let's go forward some." The incoming tide was washing well up on the reef. Ash had to don his mask as he plunged head and shoulders underwater to make the necessary adjustment. Once more he pressed the button, and Ross's gasp was echoed by one from the girl. The cliff again, but there was no castle dominating it, only a ruin, hardly more than rubble. Now, above the sites of the saucer depressions, great pylons of silvery metal, warmed into fire brilliance by the sunset, raked into the sky like gaunt skeleton fingers. There were no ships, no signs of any life. Even the vegetation which had showed on shore had vanished. there was an atmosphere of stark abandonment and death, which struck the Terrans forcibly. Those pylons, Ross studied them. Something familiar in their construction teased his memory. That refuel planet where the derelict ship had set down twice, on the voyage out and on their return. That had been a world of metal structures, and he believed he could trace a kinship between his memory of those and these pylons. Surely they had no connection with the earlier castle on the cliff. Once more, Ash ducked to reset the probe, and in the fast-fading light they watched a third and last picture. But now they might have been looking at the island of the present, save that it bore no vegetation and there was a rawness about it, a sharpness of rock outline now vanished. Those pylons, were they the key to the change which had come upon this world? What were they? Who had set them there? For the last, Ross thought he had an answer. They were certainly the product of the Galactic Empire. And the castle, the ships, natives, settlers? Two widely different eras, and the mystery still lay between them. Would they ever be able to bring the key to it out of time? They swam for the shore, where Uy had a fire blazing and their supper prepared. How many years lying between those probes? Ross pulled broiled fish apart with his fingers. That first was 10,000 years ago. The second? Ash paused. Only 200 years later. But, Ross stared at his superior, that means that there was a war or some drastic form of invasion, yes. You mean that the Star People arrived and just took over this whole planet? Karara asked. But why? And those pylons, what were they for? How much later was that last picture? 500 years. The pylons were gone too then, Ross commented. But why? He echoed Karara's question. Ash had taken up his notebook, but he did not open it. I think, there was a sharp, grim note in his voice, we had better find out. Put up a gate? Ash broke all previous rules of their service with his answer. Yes, a gate. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4 of Key Out of Time by Andre Norton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Key Out of Time. Chapter 4 Storm Menace. We have to know. Ash leaned back against the crate they had just emptied. Something was done here, in 200 years, and then an empty world. Pandora's box. Ross drew a hand across his forehead, smearing sweat and fine sand into a brand. Ash nodded. Maybe we run that risk, losing all the devils of the aliens. But what if the Reds opened the box first on one of their settlement worlds? There it was again, the old thorn which had prodded them into risks and recklessness. Danger ahead on both paths. Don't risk trying to learn galactic secrets, but don't risk your enemies learning them either. You held a white-hot iron in both hands in this business. And Ash was right. They had stumbled on something here which hinted that a whole world had been altered to suit some plan. Suppose the secret of that alteration was discovered by their enemies. Were the ship and castle people natives? Ross wondered aloud. Just at a guess, they were. Or at least settlers who had been established here so long they had developed a local form of civilization, which was about on the level of a feudal society. You mean because of the castle and the rock bombardment. But what about the ships? Two separate phases of a society at war, perhaps a more progressive against a less technically advanced. American warships paying a visit to the Shogun's Japan, for example. Ross grinned. Those warships didn't seem to fancy their welcome. They steered out to sea fast enough when the rocks began to fall. Yes, but the ships could exist in the castle pattern. The pylons could not. Which period are you aiming for first, the castle or the pylons? Castle first, I think. Then, if we can't pick up any hints, we'll take some jumps forward until we do connect. Only we'll be under severe handicaps. If we could only plant an analyzer somewhere in the castle as a beginning. Ross did not show his surprise. If Ash was talking on those terms, then he was intending to do more than just lurk around a little beyond the gate. He was really planning to pick up alien speech patterns, eventually assume an alien agent identity. "Gordon!" Carrara appeared between two of the lace trees. She came so hastily that the contents of the 2 cups she carried slopped over. "You must hear what Hori has to say." The tall Samoan who trailed her spoke quickly. For the first time since Ross had known him, he was very serious, a frown line between his eyes. "There is a bad storm coming. Our instruments register it." "How long away?" Ash was on his feet. "A day, maybe 2. Ross could see no change in the sky, islands, or sea. They had had idyllic weather for the 6 weeks since their planeting. No sign of any such trouble in the Hawaiian paradise. "It's coming," Hori repeated. "The gate is half up," Ash thought aloud. "Too much of it set to be dismantled again in a hurry." "If it's completed," Hori wanted to know, "would it ride out a storm?" "It might, behind that reef where we have it based. To finish it would be a fast job." Hori flexed his hands. "We're more brawn than brain in these matters, Gordon, but you've all our help, for what it's worth. What about the ship? Does it lift on schedule?" "Check with Rimbaud about that. This storm, how will it compare to a Pacific typhoon?" The Samoan shook his head. "How do we know? We have not yet had to face the local variety." "The islands are low," Carrara commented. "Winds and water could—" "Yes, we'd better see Rimbaud about a shelter if needed." If the settlement had drowsed, now its inhabitants were busy. It was decided that they could shelter in the spaceship should the storm reach hurricane proportions. But before its coming, the gate must be finished. The final fitting was left to Ash and Ross, and the older agent fastened the last bolt when the waters beyond the reef were already wind-ruffled, the sky darkening fast. The dolphins swam back and forth in the lagoon, and with them Carrara, though Ash had twice waved her to the shore. There was no sunlight left, and they worked with torches. Ash began his inspection of the relatively simple transfer, the 2 upright bars, the slab of opaque material forming a doorstep between them. This was only a skeleton of the gates Ross had used in the past, but continual experimentation had produced this more easily transported installation. Piled in a net were several supply containers ready for an exploring run. Extra gill packs, the analyzer, emergency rations, a medical kit, all the basics. Was Ash going to try now? He had activated the transfer, the rods were glowing faintly, the slab they guarded having an eerie blue glimmer. He probably only wanted to be sure it worked. What happened at that moment, Ross could never find any adequate words to describe, nor was he sure he could remember. The disorientation of the pass-through he had experienced before. This time, he was whirled into a vortex of feeling in which his body, his identity, were ripped from him and he lost touch with all stability. Instinctively, he lashed out, his reflexes more than his conscious will keeping him above water in the wild rage of a storm-whipped sea. The light was gone. Here was only dark and beating water. Then a lightning flash ripped wide the heavens over Ross as his head broke the surface, and he saw, with unbelieving eyes, that he was being thrust shoreward, not to the strand of Finger Island, but against a cliff where water pounded an unyielding wall of rock. Ross comprehended that somehow he had been jerked through the gate, that he was now fronting the land that had been somewhere beneath the heights supporting the castle. Then he fought for his life to escape the hammer of the sea, determined to crack him against the surface of the cliff. A rough surface loomed up before him, and he threw himself in that direction, embracing a rock, striving to cling through the backwash of the wave which had brought him there. His nails grated and broke on the stone, and then the fingers of his right hand caught in a hole, and he held with all his strength in his gasping, beaten body. He had had no preparation, no warning, and only the tough survival will which had been trained and bred into him saved his life. As the water washed back, Ross strove to pull up farther on his anchorage, to be above the strike of the next wave. Somehow he gained a foot before it came. The mask of the gillpack saved him from being smothered in that curling torrent as he clung stubbornly, resisting again the pull of the retreating sea. Inch by inch, between the waves, he fought for footing and stable support. Then he was on the surface of the rock, out of all but the lash of spray. He crouched there, spent and gasping. The thunder roar of the surf, and beyond it the deeper mutter of the rage in the heavens, was deafening, dulling his sense as much as the ordeal through which he had passed. He was content to cling where he was, hardly conscious of his surroundings. Sparks of light along the shore to the north at last caught Ross's attention. They moved, some clustering along the wave line, a few strung up the cliff. And they were not part of the storm's fireworks. Men here. Why at this moment? Another bolt of lightning showed him the answer. On the reef fringe, which ran a tongue of land into the sea, hung a ship, 2 ships, pounded by every hammer wave. Shipwrecks. And those lights must mark castle dwellers drawn to aid the survivors. Ross crawled across his rock on his hands and knees, wavered along the cliff wall until he was again faced with angry water. To drop into that would be a mistake. He hesitated, and now more than his own predicament struck home to him. Ash. Ash had been ahead of him at the time gate. If Ross had been jerked through to this past, then somewhere in the water, on the shore, Gordon was here too. But where to find him? Setting his back to the cliff and holding to the rough stone, Ross got to his feet, trying to see through the welter of foam and water. Not only the sea poured here. Now a torrential rain fell into the bargain, streaming down about him, battering his head and shoulders. A chill rain which made him shiver. He wore gillpack, weighted belt with its sheathed tool and knife, flippers, and the pair of swimming trunks which had been suitable for the Hawaika he knew. But this was a different world altogether. Dare he use his torch to see the way out of here? Ross watched the lights to the north, deciding they were not too unlike his own beam, and took the chance. Now he stood on a shelf of rock pitted with depressions, all pools. To his left was a drop into a boiling, whirling cauldron from which points of stone fanged. Ross shuddered. At least he had escaped being pulled into that. To his right, northward, there was another space of sea, a narrow strip, and then a second ledge. He measured the distance between that and the one on which he perched. Staying where he was would not locate Ash. Ross stripped off his flippers, made them fast in his belt. Then he leapt and landed painfully as his feet slipped and he skidded face down on the northern ledge. As he sat up, rubbing a bruised and scraped knee, he saw lights advancing in his direction, and between them a shadow crawling from water to shore. Ross stumbled along the ledge, hastening to reach that figure, who lay still now just out of the waves. Ash? Ross's limping pace became a trot, but he was too late. The other lights, 2 of them, had reached the shadow. A man, or at least a body which was humanoid, sprawled face down. Other men, 3 of them, gathered over the exhausted swimmer. Those who held the torches were still partially in the dark, but the third stooped to roll over their find. Ross caught the glint of light on a metallic head covering, the glisten of wet armor of some type on the fellow's back and shoulders as he made quick examination of the sea's victim. Then Ross halted, his eyes wide. A hand rose and fell with expert precision. There had been a blade in that hand. Already, the three were turning away from the man so ruthlessly dispatched. Ash, or some survivor of the wrecked ships? Ross retreated to the end of the ledge. The narrow stream of water dividing it from the rock where he had won ashore washed into a cave in the cliff. Dare he try to work his way into that? Masked, with the gill pack, he could go under surface if he were not smashed by the waves against some wall. He glanced back. The lights were very close to the end of his ledge. To withdraw to the second rock would mean being caught in a dead end, for he dared not enter the whirlpool on its far side. There was really no choice: stay and be killed, or try for the cave. Ross fastened on his flippers and lowered his body into the narrow stream. The fact that it was narrow and guarded on either side by the ledges tamed the waves a little, and Ross found the tug against him not so great as he feared it would be. Keeping handholds on the rock, he worked along, head and shoulders often under the wash of rolling water, but winning steadily to the break in the cliff wall. Then he was through, into a space much larger than the opening, water-filled but not with the wild turbulence of waves. Had he been sighted? Ross kept a handhold to the left of that narrow entrance, his body floating with the rise and fall of the water. He could make out the gleam of light without. It might be that one of those hunters had leaned out over the runnel of the cave entrance, was flashing his torch down into the water there. Behind mask plate, Ross's lips writhed in the snarl of the hunted. In here, he would have the advantage. Let one of them, or all three, try to follow through that rock entrance, and... But if he had been sighted at the mouth of the lair, none of his trackers appeared to wish to press the hunt. The light disappeared, and Ross was left in the dark. He counted 100 slowly, and then a second 100 before he dared use his own torch. For all, its slit entrance was a good-sized hideaway he had chanced upon. And he discovered, when he ventured to release his wall hold and swim out into its middle, the bottom arose in a slope toward its rear. Moments later, Ross pulled out of the water once more, to crouch shivering on a ledge only lapped now and then by wavelets. He had found a temporary refuge, but his good fortune did not quiet his fears. Had that been Ash on the shore? And why had the swimmer been so summarily executed by the men who found him? The ships caught on the reef, the castle on the cliff above his head, enemies, ship's crews and castle men. But the callous act of the shore patrol argued a state of war carried to fanatic proportions, perhaps interracial conflict. He could not hope to explore until the storm was over. To plunge back into the sea would not find Ash, and to be hunted along the shore by an unknown enemy was simply asking to die without achieving any good in return. No, he must remain where he was for the present. Ross unhooked the torch from his belt and used it on this higher portion of the cave. He was perched on a ledge which protruded into the water in the form of a wedge. At his back, the wall of the cave was rough. The trails of weed were festooned on its projections. The smell of fishy decay was strong enough to register as Ross pulled off his mask. As far as he could now see, there was no exit except by sea. A movement in the water brought his light flashing down into the dark flood. Then a sleek head arose in the path of that ray. Not a man swimming, but one of the dolphins. Ross's exclamation of surprise was half gasp, half cry. The second dolphin showed for a moment, and between the shadow of their bodies, just under the surface, moved a third form. Ash! Ross had no idea how the dolphins had come through the time gate, but that they had guided to safety at Terran, he did not doubt at all. Ash! But it was not Ash who came wading to the ledge where Ross waited with hand outstretched. He had been so sure of the other's identity that he blinked in complete bewilderment as his eyes met Carrara's and she half stumbled, half reeled against him. His arms about her shoulders steadied her, and her shivering body was close to his as she leaned her full weight upon him. Her hands made a feeble movement to her mask, and he pulled it off. Uncovered, her face was pale and drawn. Her eyes were now closed, and her breath came in ragged, tearing sobs which shook her even more. "How did you get here?" Ross demanded, even as he pushed her down on the ledge. Her head moved slowly, in a weak gesture of negation. "I don't know. We were close to the gate. There was a flash of light. Then—" her voice sealed up with a note of hysteria in it. "Then I was here, and Tawa with me. Tina Rao came. Ross, there was a man swimming. He got ashore. He was getting to his feet and they killed him." Ross's hold tightened. He stared into her face with fierce demand. "Was it Gordon?" She blinked, brought her hand up to her mouth, and wiped it back and forth across her chin. There was a small red trickle growing between her fingers, dripping down her arm. "Gordon?" She repeated it as if she had never heard the name before. "Yes, did they kill Gordon?" In his grasp, she was swaying back and forth. Then, realizing he was shaking her, Ross got himself under control. But a measure of understanding had come into her eyes. "No, not Gordon. Where is Gordon?" "You haven't seen him?" Ross persisted, knowing it was useless. "Not since we were at the gate." Her words were less slurred. "Weren't you with him?" "No, I was alone." "Ross, where are we?" "Better say, when are we?" he replied. "We're through the gate and back in time. And we have to find Gordon." He did not want to think of what might have happened out on the shore. End of Chapter 4.